Welcome to Cartoon Investigation. Today we're uncovering the dark saga of how a spiky-haired boy with a talking dog brought one of animation's greatest networks to its knees. The story begins in 1995 when creator Scott Fellows first pitched Johnny Test to Nickelodeon. The network, demonstrating remarkable foresight, rejected it outright. For nearly a decade, the concept collected dust until Warner Bros. Animation, perhaps desperate for content, revived it for Kids WB in 2005. What no one could have predicted was how this seemingly innocent cartoon would eventually infiltrate Cartoon Network and become the symbol of its creative downfall. In the beginning, Johnny Test wasn't completely terrible. His first season featured traditional animation with fluid character movement and at least some creative effort. The premise was transparently derivative, essentially Dexter's Laboratory with the genders swapped around. Where Dexter was a boy genius with an annoying blonde sister named Dee, Johnny Test gave us a troublemaking blonde with two genius redheaded sisters. The similarities weren't subtle, but the show at least had professional production values. Then came the pivotal moment that would transform Johnny Test from merely derivative to actively harmful. Warner Bros. Pulled back funding, and production was outsourced to Canada under Cookie Jar Entertainment. This fateful decision ushered in the Adobe Flash era of Johnny Test and signaled the beginning of Cartoon Network's creative collapse. The Flash animation catastrophe cannot be overstated. Gone were the fluid movements and detailed expressions of traditional animation. In their place came stiff, jerky character movements, recycled assets, and the birth of the now infamous whip crack sound effect. This sound, which first appeared in Season 2, would eventually become so overused that some episodes featured it nearly 200 times in 22 minutes. It wasn't just annoying, it was a literal audio manifestation of creative bankruptcy. The Dexter's Laboratory connection runs deeper than surface-level premise similarities. Chris Savino, who directed the widely criticized final season of Dexter's Laboratory, became Johnny Test's supervising producer for Season 1. This direct pipeline from Dexter's decline to Johnny Test's creation represents a deliberate transfer of creative failure from one show to another. The thick outlines, simplified designs, and formulaic storytelling that plagued the late-era Dexter's Laboratory found new life in Johnny Test. As one animation forum commenter noted, the only thing that the shows really have in common is the fact that Chris Savino, who directed on the final, disastrous season of Dexter's Lab, also directed some episodes of Johnny Test. This connection is more significant than it seems. It suggests Johnny Test wasn't just inspired by Dexter's Laboratory, it was born from its creative decline. The tragedy deepened in 2008 when Kids WB shut down operations. Johnny Test, now a cheaply produced Flash cartoon with a recognizable name, was acquired by Cartoon Network. What followed was a slow-motion train wreck that would last for 6 years. Cartoon Network, once the home of visionary works like Powerpuff Girls and Courage the Cowardly Dog, now found itself airing endless reruns of a show that embodied everything these classics had fought against. At its peak, Johnny Test occupied up to 4 hours of daily programming, precious slots that could have gone to new, innovative shows with actual artistic merit. The production company behind Johnny Test's animation, Kaleidoscope Digital Productions, would eventually shut down in 2008, with some animation historians suggesting that the soul-crushing work of producing Johnny Test's low-quality animation contributed to the studio's demise. The show was then passed to another Canadian studio, where the quality declined even further. Former Johnny Test voice actor Louis Chirillo, who voiced Dookie the talking dog, reportedly admitted he was ashamed to have worked on the show and retired to Brazil in 2010 to escape the association. When a show's own talent flees the country to distance themselves from the project, something has gone terribly wrong. The damage Johnny Test inflicted on Cartoon Network went beyond mere scheduling issues. Its success, despite its poor quality, sent a devastating message throughout the animation industry. Loud, flashy, cheaply produced content could succeed over artistic merit. Executive boardrooms across America took note. Why invest in expensive, creator-driven animation when you could produce 3 Johnny Test-style shows for the same budget? Resources that could have funded experimental shows were instead poured into this proven mediocrity, creating a feedback loop of declining quality. Shows with unique art styles or complex storytelling became harder to greenlight. Johnny Test had triggered a race to the bottom. Perhaps most tellingly, Johnny Test sparked a quiet rebellion among animation professionals. Multiple prominent creators reportedly despised the show from its debut, including creators who would later lead Cartoon Network's renaissance, the minds behind Adventure Time, Regular Show, and Gravity Falls. These animators saw Johnny Test as representing everything wrong with the industry: cynical, cheap, and creatively bankrupt. The show's continued success, despite widespread criticism, revealed something disturbing about children's entertainment in the 2000s. Johnny Test survived not because children loved it, but because they would watch almost anything colorful and loud enough. The show employed psychological hooks designed to capture attention through sensory overload rather than meaningful connection. Its hyper-pacing, bright colors, and constant noise created a spectacle that registered as entertaining to young brains simply by overwhelming them. The deliberate decision to make Johnny the protagonist rather than his scientist sisters, despite them being more interesting characters, revealed another layer of cynicism. Focus groups had convinced executives that boys wouldn't watch shows with female leads. So despite Susan and Mary being the characters with actual skills and personality, the bland Johnny remained front and center, testing their inventions in increasingly repetitive episodes. When Johnny Test finally ended its original run on Christmas Day 2014, animation fans celebrated what they hoped was the end of an era. Cartoon Network had begun its creative recovery with shows like Adventure Time and Regular Show, programs that treated their audience with intelligence and genuine creativity. These shows succeeded not by pandering to the lowest common denominator, but by raising the bar for what children's animation could achieve. Yet the Johnny Test story wasn't over. In 2021, Netflix inexplicably revived the series with improved animation, but the same creative emptiness. The revival proved that even the most criticized properties could find new life in the streaming era if they had brand recognition. A disturbing reminder that quantity often trumps quality in the content wars. Johnny Test's legacy extends far beyond its own episodes. It fundamentally altered how networks approached animation during its run. The show's financial success, despite its poor animation quality, encouraged other studios to adopt similar cost-cutting measures, dragging down industry standards across the board. For several years, networks became wary of creator-driven shows with unique visual styles. Constant noise created a spectacle that registered as entertaining to young brains simply by overwhelming them. The deliberate decision to make Johnny the protagonist rather than his scientist sisters, despite them being more interesting characters, revealed another layer of cynicism. Focus groups had convinced executives that boys wouldn't watch shows with female leads. So despite Susan and Mary being the characters with actual skills and personality, the bland Johnny remained front and center, testing their inventions in increasingly repetitive episodes. When Johnny Test finally ended its original run on Christmas Day 2014, animation fans celebrated what they hoped was the end of an era. Cartoon Network had begun its creative recovery with shows like Adventure Time and Regular Show, programs that treated their audience with intelligence and genuine creativity. These shows succeeded not by pandering to the lowest common denominator, but by raising the bar for what children's animation could achieve. Yet the Johnny Test story wasn't over. In 2021, Netflix cracks have finally faded, but the scars on animation history remain. A cautionary tale of what happens when profits trump passion and creativity bows to commerce. For a generation of viewers and creators, Johnny Test will forever symbolize the moment Cartoon Network lost its soul, before finally, thankfully, finding it again.